This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now. Welcome to Good Areas Live. This is the Wagon Wheel. I'm Jarrod Kimber, and this is the show where we answer your questions on cricket, whatever they may be, big or small, sideways, backwards, diagonals. Maybe they'll move two pieces forward, but one piece to the side. I don't know why this ended up being chess, but we answer a lot of questions on cricket. If you're watching live, the YouTube super chats are the best way to go. But, I like big buts. The best way to do this is always via Patreon. So if you can support us on Patreon, that is definitely the best way for us to receive your questions, like Hertz has, who says, in previous Wagons, we spoke about Australian and Indian regional cricket cultures, except Yorkshire batters prowess. I did not hear much about regional cricket culture in English media. Were there any other such more regional specialties? Oh, okay. Yorkshire is obviously the most famous. I mean, Surrey is a brilliantly successful club as well. So I suppose that's the other famous one. And then you've got Durham of recent times, right? Where sort of random stars come out of nowhere. You know, Harmison, Collingwood, Wood, Stokes. I'm trying to think if there's any others that people thought might have been. So they had a bit of a talent factory for a little while. And they're a very new team as well. I suppose the rest of it is the sort of, you know, Lancashire, of course. So Lancashire leagues, Bradford leagues, Staffordshire leagues are probably the other ones where you see a lot of sort of English talent in one section. But mostly is private schools, or as, what do they call them in England? Public schools. Adityan said, like your episodes on trades. Thank you very much. Just to say that it was a hell of a lot of fun to do. Remember, me and Varun quite often are like, is this a 20-minute episode or a 2-hour one? And that trade one was always going to go long. Do you have any thoughts on the current Samson trade hypothesis? RR have asked for Stubbs and Rizvi for Delhi, Shubman and Brevis or Jadeja. Oh, okay. Which one of these are according to you affair? So RR have asked for Stubbs and Rizvi and Dubé and Brevis, or Jadeja and Curran. Trying to think of their team. I think we've talked about the Dubé one before. Surely you're not giving up Brevis, though, at this stage. Yeah, I've got a feeling we've had the Dubé conversation with Rajasthan before, and we might have even suggested a direct swap for them. That one makes sense. If I'm trying to think of Delhi's lineup just off the top of my head as well. But yeah, if I'm Rajasthan, I'm pretty happy with that, and I think that makes sense. You're certainly not getting Dubé and Brevis, so I think that's a bit unrealistic. Curran and Patharana is interesting. Do you really want Patharana at the moment? Curran gives you a lot more flexibility. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure those are great trades, but I'd have to think about it a bit more. Sam says, you've talked about players who were ahead of their time in white ball cricket, and so they were held back by the era they played in, like Simons. Which players would you say were similarly ahead of their time in red ball cricket, aside from the obvious candidates like Sehwag? You know, Trumper is certainly someone who I think probably was not held back. I think you would say Sobers, Clive Lloyd. It'd be interesting to see what someone like Keith Stackpole would have done. Maybe he wasn't quite good enough to make that big of an impact. Trying to think of some others where you have that kind of, where you have someone who's, you know, ahead of the, even someone like Carson Garvery, right? Like, and you can throw in Ian Botham and Tony Greig and many other players, but players who can bowl both pace and spin. I felt like it was seen, outside of Sobers, it was seen as a bit of a novelty, right? Whereas actually, if you can manage that, isn't that if you've got a guy who's a new ball bowler, which is what Sobers was, and then a good secondary spinner, that's two bowlers in one, right? You don't really want to bring them back on for that many other fast bowling spells. And you can use their spin as a, you know, holding or a defensive option or even an attacking option if that's what their skill sets are. So yeah, I'd say there's probably a couple of those sort of multi-skilled bowlers that perhaps weren't used as professional. A lot of the attacking players, like I think a lot of the attacking batters. So I think Gordon Greenidge could have done a lot more damage I don't think he was being held back by the West Indies or even by orthodoxy. I think it was just that because he was trained by England and by the West Indies, he almost had this dichotomy within him, right, himself, right, which is part of his strength, but also probably kept him from being just like an absolute destroyer of worlds as an attacking player. Like his strike rate isn't that fantastic. I'm trying to think of some others. Yeah, I think that's the ones that come to mind. There's probably also how many hit the pitch seam bowlers were overlooked because everyone was going for swing bowling, and then probably vice versa, you could say, of recent times as well. I do wonder how many first change bowlers just over the years have been overlooked because teams keep looking for opening bowlers instead. Josh says, say you made a test 11 to tour all 9 WTC nations using Joel Garner, the mandatory pick on this channel, plus 6 of the greatest test all-rounders post-1960. Sobers, Callas, Imran, Hadley, Jadeja, Ashwin. I'm not sure I have Ashwin as a great all-rounder, by the way. Great player. With 7 bowling options, how many overs does each player get per game? And do either of the Sobers or Callas all-ball specialist even bowl? Yeah, you don't need Sobers at all. I mean, I suppose you would only say that Sobers being a tall left-arm spinner is helpful, and you don't have a left armer. So who's taking the new ball in this side? So you've got Hadley and Garner. So you've got Hadley and Imran probably taking the new ball, right? And you've got Garner at first change. It's hard to get any use out of Sobers' bowling in that kind of a lineup. But I suppose you also then still have a left-arm seamer for the days that you need it, right? I don't think you bowl Callas all that much. He's another right-arm seamer. I think if you're going to give the full seamer overs to anyone, you're going to give them to Sobers over Callas just because he's left arm. And, you know, having looked at their numbers, even factoring in that Sobers wasn't a particularly great spinner, he's still his match factor and error factor and everything suggests he's about as good as Callas, but on twice the bowling load. So I'd say he's probably a better bowler than Callas. So yeah, and also Callas is maybe a little bit too similar to Hadley anyway, right? Like maybe faster at times, but again, another outswing bowler. So I suppose if you've got a team of right-handers, and I don't know, you know, you use Callas a little bit more, but yeah, you wouldn't use Callas much. I think Sobers just gives you flexibility because it gives you a wrist spinner as well, and it gives you the left arm. So Callas, even if you say Callas was like 5% better a bowler, which I don't agree with, but I think is within the ballparks of possibilities with Sobers, you're probably still using Sobers more, just because he's a spinner and because he's left arm. So no, I don't think I would use Callas at all in that situation. Yeah, outside of it's swinging like mad. You know, because there are other situations where you would use Callas over Sobers, right? But if you're just looking in general, I don't see how he fits into that kind of a side. Reese says, Colin Cowdrey, the player, how good was he? The whole spirit of cricket BS seems to be his legacy, really. But how does he compare to his peers? We didn't put him in our list of the greatest batters, so he didn't make the top 50. He was certainly in our long list, and I'm on my other computer. I'm on my live podcast computer, so I don't have access to my full. I do, but it would take me forever to find it. I still think he was a really, really good player. 114 matches in that era is pretty special, I think, like to be around for that long. He averages 44 in Test cricket and 43 in first class cricket. It's close enough that I'm not too worried about it. Like I'm willing to say that his first class numbers are you know, within the range that we would expect, and maybe he did slightly better. He, as a player, I think when I'm just trying to have a look at his full record. So in Australia, he averages 35. In Pakistan, it's 33, and South Africa, it's 33. He was very good in the West Indies. So there are little bits of his record that I kind of like. Obviously, didn't play much in India, but was very good in India. I'm trying to think. So he played from 54 to 75. So what? Australia, West Indies are the two best bowling attacks he went up against. He averages 50 against the West Indies on some pretty flat pitches and 34 against Australia. He's certainly in England great and a fantastic player, but probably not quite at the next that sort of, you know, all-time great level. He's also got the same issue. I can't remember if we wrote about him in the book as well, but he's one of these England players who bats everywhere, right? This is 24 matches opening the batting, 24 at first drop, 32 at second drop, 41 at third drop, and also 10 at number 6. I think he was probably a number 5 specialist, which is another reason, as good as he was, maybe batting him all around the order. But I think it does show you his overall talent that he could move around a little bit there. But certainly a great player. Of the batters of his era, I think I obviously have him. I probably have him in that sort of. There's a couple of other English players whose names are completely forgetting, but there's the really pretty player whose name I've forgotten, Peter May, and there's another guy that I've forgotten as well. So there's about 2 or 3 other guys that I would say are kind of on his level or maybe slightly above. Then you've got the West Indians. You've probably got Neil Harvey. They're ahead of him. So there's a bunch of West Indians and Neil Harvey. When does he play? 54. Yeah, so he's probably just after some of the Indian batters are really good. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else coming through. Yeah, probably similar to someone like Bert Sutcliffe. Again, fantastic players, but not quite at that level. Ali says, how do you rate Mike Hesson as a coach? Do you think his T20 playbook is getting outdated and relying on more multi-role players, Islamabad United and Pakistan? I think he's a coach with a method, and it's probably not as dynamic as it might have been at a certain point. I don't think you look at I don't think you hire Mike Hesson, maybe this is the better way of putting it, for revolutionary tactics. I think you hire Mike Hesson to make sure that everyone is up to the professional levels that is required. And that's very different, Ali, right? Very different kind of method that you're looking for there. They hired Mickey Arthur, and now they've hired Mike Hesson. They had Gary Kirsten in the middle, right? These are guys who are very, very good at making sure that the cricketers are professional, know what their role is, understand what is expected of them, and all these sorts of things. That's the kind of coach Mike Hesson is. And, the little bits I've seen in Pakistan, I think that's what he's trying to do. He's in a kind of weird position too, isn't he? Because he's, unless it's changed, my memory of him being signed was till the end of the World Cup, which is a T20 World Cup. But he's also obviously got 1 days, and you're like, well, where does that kind of fit in? So it is a bit weird. Lemon says, what number in Australia's fast bowling depth would not make the England Ashes team? I would think bowlers like Xavier Bartlett, Spencer Johnson would make the England team, but how far down the list would still make it? Well, that's a really good question. It's the England Ashes. Just let me bring this up. So England Ashes squad 2025. Just so I've got the names in front of me. So so what you're really looking there is the weakest member of that squad in bowling. So you got Wood, Tongue, Potts, Cass, Atkinson. There's no one that weak, is there? Right? So there's no one easy to pop off. I mean, you could suggest that Australia has better depth. Spencer Johnson probably gets in because his left arm. I mean, the injury thing is obviously always a concern with him, but he's going to get in that squad. They probably don't pick people like Fergus O'Neill or Michael Neser because they have other versions of that. Maybe they pick Michael Neser because he can bat, but at his age, I'm not sure he's completely in it. Xavier Bartlett's first-class bowling average is 26. It's still pretty good. I mean, he hasn't played a lot. I'm not sure you take Xavier Bartlett over anyone in that squad, do you? I'm probably higher on Potts than most people. Probably lower on Atkinson than most people. Wood. But yeah, I don't think I would take Xavier Bartlett over them. Having said that, that's not the same as saying that he wouldn't have got picked ahead of one of these players, because could you not say that he could do a similar role as Matthew Potts, right? And maybe he's a bit younger than him, maybe a bit faster as well. So you could make that. So it's probably not Bartlett, is it? But yeah, when you get to Fergus O'Neill, Michael Neser, so you've got the guys who are out of the squad. You had Spencer Johnson, you had Xavier Bartlett, you've obviously got Brendan Doggett. Brendan Doggett's good, but would you pick Brendan Doggett? Again, is it Potts or Atkinson? But Atkinson can bat. I don't know. It's actually a trickier question just because I'm a bit high on Potts and Atkinson can bat. Tongue has a unique skill set that I can't think of an Australian bowler who kind of has. And then you've got what Jofra and Wood. So I know what you mean. I'm not sure I exactly can make the same claim or make it fit the way you want it to fit. Rob says, say you're the sole Indian selector. It's about time. And there are no over restrictions. What would your team be up in T20? I guess I'm really asking how few gun bowlers could get away with in T20. Yeah, I would just pick 3 specialist bowlers and have batting down to number 8. So it's not that much different to probably what they're doing now. You'd have Bumrah, Kuldeep, Varun Chakravarti, and obviously occasionally a second seamer when you needed that. And I'm assuming these guys are all in like peak genius mode. And then you've got all the all-rounders that you would fit in around them. What do you want? Bumrah to bowl 6 to 8 overs a game, maybe? And then you've got Varun Chakravarti to bowl 6. He can bowl up to 10 probably. Kuldeep could bowl up to 10. I'm talking about on their best days and all those sorts of things. So that gives you 26 overs of a 20-over game. And you've got whoever else you want to put in there, Akshar and Shivam Dubey, whichever sort of, whichever direction you want to go. Satchmo says, would England have a better chance in this forthcoming Ashes series if they batted conventionally and to preserve wickets and wear down the Australian attack that looks too old to get through 5 tests of long days in the field? The problem is, Satchmo, I don't disagree with your general theory because that's what India did, a few years back, right? A couple of times over, really. The issue is at the moment that the Australian wickets are so spicy. Can you do that anymore, right? Like we really I'm not sure the English techniques have these skill sets to do that. So Root can do it. Stokes could do it in parts. Who else do they have that can do that? I'm not sure they have anyone else technically sound enough or, with the individual skill sets available to them to be able to do that. So I think in my mind, I would say they can't do that. But I understand your general point. I think back the talent that you have and the way that it plays. Also think when you go into Australia, you need to, I don't want to say rock them, but you need to upset the balance of Australia a little bit. And you do that by playing to your strengths, probably not your weaknesses. Pav says, how do you see the legacy of post-10-11 Australian Ashes team? They've won 2 World Cups, 1 World T20 and 1 World Test Championship. They have a 1.9 win-loss ratio in tests with 5.1 at home. So I get it. They had sandpaper game, struggled to get away at times, took a long time to put together their T20 side. They've been battered a few times. Yeah, I don't kind of see it as one era. I suppose it is because of the fast bowling or the bowling in general. I don't know if I necessarily have seen it as one era, but I suppose that they've been a very good side, but at the same stage, there has been times when New Zealand, Pakistan, India, and even England have taken the headlines away. So in some ways, it's like a more trophy-driven version of like what South Africa did in that period from whenever it was, 06 to 12, whatever their reign was, 13, 14. In that it's really, really good, but other teams did some really interesting things at that time as well. So it's not as if they are the sole beneficiary of that. But I think what it shows you is if you have an incredible bowling attack, right, you don't always have to get everything right. And I think that's probably what we've seen from Australia, that they have made some mistakes and they have struggled with batting. And, they haven't always been at the top of their game, but their bowling attack's been so good that they've found a way to still be really successful. And, if you're making a team, that's where you start, right? Especially all format bowling. Hazelwood and Lyon, not always as much, but you've still got, Zampa behind that, right? And then Hazelwood becomes a white ball bowler as well. Well, in fact, they didn't even use him, which is probably the biggest issue they had. Cam says, do we give New Zealand enough credit for how good they've been, even to just be on the fringe of the top sides? The population, tiny fraction of almost all the other full member nations, cricket not being close to the #1 sport. Even the funding they get from the ICC wouldn't go as far as it would in New Zealand compared to a country with weaker economy. Yeah, I mean, me and Bharat Sundaresan have always had this argument. I think what Barrett would say is that places like Australia and New Zealand have an incredible advantage over other countries in that as much talent doesn't get missed as much, and it has the ability to have access to these incredible facilities. I can't remember what it is, but where Ian O'Brien told me there's like a little state-run section in New Zealand where he's from. So that would be what Wellington, around Wellington somewhere, where like so many professional athletes came out of it because the facilities were just incredible, right? And you know, and the sort of the professionalism, even when they weren't professional, if that makes sense. So I think we always have to factor that in. But it is remarkable. But I do think we give them enough credit for it. I do think it's, yeah, amazing. What countries like New Zealand and Australia do, I think I did a podcast the other day. I forgot the name of the podcast now, but he was sort of asking me about it. And I said, look, if you look at what Australia's done, right, for coming fifth in the Olympics or fourth in the Olympics or whatever their highest ranking is in the Olympics, with like 20 million people, 25 million people, is bonkers, right? And New Zealand, if you look at medals per capita, right, over the history of the Olympics, again, it's bonkers what these countries have done. But there's also reasons why it's happened. Like, it's not like there are just better athletes there. Let us take a short break here on the Wagon Wheel, and we'll be back soon with more of this.
Ross Taylor couldn't see at night or when the clouds were in. Eventually, he had to see an eye specialist who would fix his eyesight. In the 2 years before the change, he still averaged more than 50 in international cricket. The top level of batting talent can basically see in the dark. That is who we are talking about in our new book, The Art of Batting. Head over and order your copy today. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now.
Arafin says, given what we know, do we know anything? The ability to pick up the ball early to some degree is necessary for someone to become a batter at the first class level. And given what we don't know, what the exact mechanics of it, it seems to be something that is developed by the subconscious as people face thousands of deliveries. Yep, that I agree with, yes. Do we know at what age this ability becomes apparent? As it is early as under 10s or late in teenagers' years? Can it in fact develop later in the mid-20s? I don't think we have any evidence of someone being like a struggling club batter and then becoming a world-class level player in their 20s. I've never heard of that. And like, do you remember there's a guy called Craig Simmons, I think that's his name, who made 100 in a Big Bash final. All these stories about him, you know, being on I think he did the power lines or something like that. You know, he had this normal job. He'd been from New South Wales, hadn't quite, you know, he'd moved to Western Australia. But when you go through it and you talk to people about him, it's still an incredible story. And he was definitely out of the game. But like, everyone could tell he could play when he was young, that he could pick the ball up early, right? So I don't know of anyone that's the case. How early you pick it up is, you know, I've been lucky enough to be around some very, very good cricketers who didn't quite make it to the top level, but I was around them at a very young age, and they were, you know, fringe. They were I probably was around 3 guys who would have played first class cricket in England, but in Australia, in a smaller setup, didn't quite get there, right? But it was very apparent from a very young age with all 3 of them that they were seeing the ball in a way that everyone else was not seeing it, right? That what we call time in cricket, right? That as you say, the subconscious. I wouldn't say, I'm trying to think, the youngest guy I would have seen, he would have been 9 or 10 when I first saw him. I wouldn't say it was apparent when he was 5 or 6, but by the time he'd played a bit of cricket, he was picking up all the signs subconsciously, as you say, and saccading his eyes and doing all those sorts of things. Not that he had to at under 12 cricket, but you know what I mean. He was doing all those sorts of things that would allow him to play at the top level of cricket because he was seeing the ball earlier than everyone else, right? And so that probably starts to come out once you've had the repetition. So you might have the ability to do that, but you also have to match it with the repetition of balls, right? So that's probably why we see people like Vittori, Imran Khan, Jadeja, later on in their career. They probably had the ability to do it when they were young, but they don't have the repetition that sort of grounded them into doing it naturally at that point, would be my guess. So yeah, I would say it's probably between 10 and 14, but I would say there's some sort of innate ability there because we don't know what it is exactly. And right in the art of batting, that was one of the things I was trying to get to. Is there a way? And no one could really answer that. And if they could have, they would have made moons off it. They wouldn't be telling me for a book. Karen says, Marco Jansen feels like an anomaly. For someone his height, he moves remarkably well and combines athleticism with serious cricketing skill. How do you see a player like him evolving? I just think taller people are more flexible and coordinated than they used to be. You look at the NBA and you look at, Giannis or Victor Wembanyama. Like, these are ridiculous athletes, right? Cameron Green, right? Bo Webster. So I do think there is an element of taller people are more coordinated now. I'm not a scientist, but like when I grew up, like if someone was 6'6", they were pretty one-dimensional, right? And that doesn't feel to be the case anymore. Having a look at that. So I think in Marco Janssen's case, I don't think he's bad. Like he's a perfect example of what I was talking about a moment ago. I wonder if eventually he can get to that point of being a test match batter at 26, 27, 28. Even later, maybe, just once he gets the repetition. But he's still a little bit loose with his batting, right? Which is quite common of younger potential all-rounders as well. And some just don't make it, right? And some do. But yeah, we haven't really seen anyone like him in a long time. I'm trying to think of Kieran Pollard's probably a couple of inches shorter. Obviously, he can bowl and bat, but you wouldn't say he ever had the same upside with his bowling. He just wasn't quick enough. Tony Greig was 6'5", I want to say. Again, not that fast, but again, a better bowler than Pollard and better bat than Pollard. So we have seen players who are tall. But natural evolution of sport seems to be towards freaks and outliers, right? And Marco Jansen is a freak and an outlier, like in every single way, that even the left arm nature of it. Ajit says, I read an article on Cricket Info that said Tendulkar played just under 40% of India's ODI matches from 09 to 11 before the World Cup. With that in mind, why are people ruling out Rohit, Kohli and Jadeja for bringing the squad for 2027, especially if Kohli and Jadeja's case, they've shown they are even fitter than most younger players around them. As you say, Rohit's lost some weight as well. I don't know who's ruling them out. I think 50 over World Cup, I think experience still plays a big part. It's a big move to move away from them. If they play and they lose, everyone will be like, they should have moved on from them. If they don't play and they lose, everyone will say they should have kept them around. If they win, then we'll have other things to discuss. But yeah, no, I don't think there's any reason why they can't play. I think they probably have to, because they're not playing Test cricket as well, and the way that cricket is played, like in the IPL, in like one big cluster, I do think they need to play semi-regular cricket. But yeah, that's just for them. I don't think that's for selection or anything. Sandip says, "What does Mohammad Shami have to do to be selected in the Indian team? He thinks he is ready." He thinks he's ready, but selectors have a different plan. His recent performance was good in rangy matches, but still wasn't selected for SA Test series. I don't know, but they might just be thinking, we don't want him to bowl now. If he's fit, let's keep him fit. For some other things up ahead, or with all of his history. I've got a feeling, and I could be wrong on this, it might be one for Robbie, that sometimes Mohammad Shami does say he's fit, and he's not quite fit, and he's not quite ready. And you remember that series in Australia when they kept trying to pick him, and he's had a lot of injuries. Maybe they're just like, we want him to play for the next 3 or 4 years. We don't think we need him now. And then if they do need him, they'll just bring him into the squad anyway. Alex says, how do you think Australia will prepare the pitches for the Ashes? Flatter decks or more seam friendly? Will they want flatter to help their weaker batting in the knowledge their strong bowling will take 20 wickets? I think they'll probably stay pretty much the same, Alex, only that Australia doesn't generally change their wickets for opponents. Like, the reason is that the wickets are already so comically in favor of Australia compared to every other country anyway, that they've never really needed to do that. But yeah, I would assume that they're just going to continue to play the same way, which means they'll be seaming around a little bit. We've had this a lot with the sort of the baseball discussions, right? Of like, what is the best pitch? And they've actually, I don't think England's got as bad a record on the low scoring pitches under baseball as people think they do. I just don't think you need to give them the flat wickets. That's kind of playing into the way that they go about their batting and their bowling. I think they're not as good when, there's Jofra aside. I'm not sure their bowlers are just skillful enough, even on a really helpful wicket, to be able to outskill the Australian bowlers, right? So if you make it a bit messy on the batting side, I would think that if you're making wickets, I think you should make them more spicy. I think they'll be more spicy anyway, just because that's what they do now. Person says, Associate Sicko question. Did you follow the trilateral series between UAE, Nepal, and USA and have any thoughts? I didn't. I kind of, with the associate cricket, like, if it comes at the right time and it's in the right time zone and I'm around, like, I'll watch everything. I'm trying to think if I did watch some of that series, actually. Maybe I did. No, I didn't. I was watching the Samoa one, right? Whichever tournament that one was. So I watched a bit of the Samoa tournament. So, yeah, that's kind of how I have always played it, which is when something sort of happens, I'll, in the right time zone at the right time, I'm all in. Also depends on workload and everything. There's a lot going on with, everything at the moment. So I haven't probably had the chance to do that. So I missed that one. Person says, where did the Hong Kong Sixers come from? Why is there a tournament from the 90s with its own format, the fourth format, and they play in Hong Kong of all places? Basically, there is, just a shit ton of money in Hong Kong. And the people who play cricket and like cricket quite often, historically, have had a lot of that money. I've been to, I want to say, Hong Kong Cricket Club, and it was one of the poshest places I've ever been in my life. I felt very uncomfortable there. And so I think they wanted like a festival type of thing. If you think about the Hong Kong Sixers, it's got a bit of a throwback to sort of festival cricket in England, right? And then on top of that, I think the rugby started before it, so they already had a bit of a template. The players were available to bring them out. Like maybe they were more affordable than maybe a footballers would have been, or maybe the footballers wouldn't have been available, or whatever that may be. Everyone I've ever heard has gone out there has really enjoyed their time. I think Robbie's just come back, has he? I don't know where he is at the moment. I haven't sent him a message today. But, I think he's played it before, I want to say, as well. So I think that tells you that they kind of like it, right? And so it exists because the players like it, the spectators like it, and there's wealth in that place. Rishi says, you said Saudi Arabia will eventually get involved in cricket. I mean, technically they are involved in cricket, but that's a different story. But instead of trying to build a full league in the desert or buy into the IPL, wouldn't it make more sense for them to stage a short, high-profile King Slam tennis equivalent? Yeah, so we actually, if you go back, Rishi, we have talked about that before. The Saudi Slam of like having a short, like of basically owning all the T20 tournaments in the world that are not the IPL, right? And then having like a champion edition in Saudi Arabia is certainly something. I think the issue at the moment is that there's so many T20 tournaments that already don't mean much. Do the Saudis really want to spend a lot of money on a lot of those leagues that are terribly run as well? Get involved with them and then maybe not get the bang for their buck. If they took all the best players in the world to Saudi Arabia, one way or another, we're talking about it, right? If they have a Saudi IPL team, we're talking about it. If they buy the IPL, so it's very different. And I think I say this, I haven't taught, this is a story that sort of I haven't kept on top of, obviously, for a couple of months. It's all I was talking to people about, but I probably haven't quite kept on top of it as much at the moment. But yeah, I don't know what their current thought process is. PJ says, Sabre, the Society for American Baseball Research runs regular meetings, conferences, studies, and research, all for the betterment of baseball and to deepen the understanding of America's pastime. Would you like to see a cricket version of this, and how would you envision that? What would that look like? So, oh my God, I did Russell Holden and Ralph Nicholson's very English-based group the other day, which is, sort of a more intellectual look at cricket. You've obviously got the Association of Cricket Statisticians and Historians. I can't remember what they are. But that other group in cricket, where they obviously do something similar. I think both those groups are very English-based. You could certainly do something with those groups or separately to them. The Association of cricket statisticians and historians and scorers is the word I was looking for, isn't it? They were actually going to give me because they've got all this content and all these experts, and they were, going to give me an expert a month to do a podcast on, and they didn't. So I think with a lot of those organizations, it's just about the fact that they're a little bit amateur, right? Like, I think they have the ideas and everything else. So you probably need some money. And I don't know if you would do that. And maybe Sabre is slightly different. Because, I mean, my knowledge of Sabre in baseball is for a long time, it was very much, Bill James on his own, and he couldn't even get a job in baseball sort of thing, right? So maybe that's what it would be. But I'm sure you could come up with something, I think there's probably kind of small groups out there. It's how you make it big, I suppose, is the most important thing. But yeah, there's a couple of things. There was a cricket expo in San Francisco, I want to say last week. There's starting to be an industry around cricket where people talk about cricket. And it certainly wasn't there for a very long time. So it is fascinating to watch. So something like this could work, PJ. PJ again says, how do you measure the success and failure of a selection panel? Why do selectors never face hard-hitting interviews like coaches, captains, and players have to? Yeah, I would say that Australia and England certainly had more of that traditionally, right? And then it's sort of moved over to that sort of general manager. George Bailey does a lot of press, doesn't he? He feels like him and even Ajit Agarkar seems, not that no one from BCCI does a lot of press, but Ajit Agarkar seems to do more than I can remember. It's a different job than coach and captain. And so obviously I would say they're going to do that. I've certainly been at events where selectors have had hard-hitting questions and everything else. I suppose traditionally also it's kind of a bit removed from everything else, but as it's that Ajit Agarkar, George Bailey role, and Rob Key, I suppose you would put up there as well. It does feel like it's changing, right? And it's becoming a little bit more like a general manager. But even so, as someone who follows American sports, even the general managers are usually, you hear less of them than you do from the coach or the star players, right? So it's always going to be further down the line, I would say, when it comes to that. But yeah, they should talk more and they should justify things. As far as measuring the success of a selection panel, it's really hard. And I'll tell you why. There's nowhere that I'm aware of that will tell you exactly who the selectors were at any one time. Right. So to be able to do that, you have to do your own research, right? You have to go back through. And even then, I think I might have done something on an Australian selection panel once. And I still got one guy wrong just because I couldn't find the newspaper article that had said that he'd moved on. It's tricky. I think I wanted to do that when Laurie Saul passed away. And because I want to work out who he had selected with or something. But anyway. Hurt says, I was listening to a podcast by a respected cricket writer who argued that allowing the coach to have a say in team selection could create unwanted dynamics. For example, players might be less open with the coach about areas they want to improve. In an ideal setup, how should the roles of coach, captain, selectors, and director of cricket and the board behave when deciding the squad for a series? It's really tricky, isn't it? Because realistically, every single coach in the world would have that. And in cricket, we think about it differently. And the reason we think about it differently, Hurts, is because of this is going to sound so weird, but it's because of the lack of substitutions. So let's say you have a big football team and there's some player who's kind of on the fringe a little bit and they're no longer, and the manager's decided that they're not going to use them as much, right? And there's a director of football or whatever the job is above that who's like, wait a minute, we brought this person in, we want you to use them. And he's like, yeah, at the moment, we've been talking to him. He's working on some things, whatever. He can still kind of come off the bench and do stuff, right? Like if there's an injury to his position and he's on the bench, he's still going to come in and play. We believe that the 11 is so sacrosanct that it cannot be changed after a game, right? And it does mean that there isn't as much dynamics available. And so you end up in a situation where, again, if you're not in that squad, right? If you're in a football squad, chances are you're probably going to be there the whole year. You might get demoted, but you get to somewhere else, but you're still actually getting paid and everything else. And cricket has never worked in that kind of similar kind of setup. So I think that there's this weird thing. We've always had a weird relationship with coaches. I think my personal belief is always that the best selection, there's no point selecting a team that a captain or a coach can't work with. Right? So maybe the best way of doing this is to be to do it in a slightly different way, which is they don't have the final say, but they have to be involved in the process, right? But realistically, like if you look at most other sports, doesn't the manager or the coach like actually decide who goes out and plays and not? Like most sports do that. So why do we think it's different in cricket? That's the thing I've never quite understood. Why in cricket we think about it and we go, well, we can't have the coach making decisions. And it's like, well, if you're playing for a baseball team, the manager basically, the general manager of the will decide on who gets hired and who doesn't, right? And who gets traded and everything else. But the manager is like, yeah, I'm not playing him. Or I'm demoting him to your minors or whatever it may be. They're still making those decisions. Or I'm not playing him in the role. I don't think he's good enough. You've given him to me and he doesn't work. And yet in cricket, for some reason, we don't do that. So I just think we're overthinking it a little bit in cricket. A coach's job should, if a coach should be saying, this is the kind of team I want. This is how I want to put it together. And of course he should know everything from his players, but that should also be brought up in the selection meeting. I think in cricket, there's too much everyone's trying to silo everything and too silent with it. I don't know. I don't think it works for us. I think it's a bug in the system that we've always had, and I'm not quite sure where it comes from. Anyway, more of this in a moment.
Brian Lara used pot plants to work on his placement. John Wright glued his glove to his bat. Sachin Tendulkar dug up practice pitches. Tatenda Taibu cut the top off his bat. Claire Taylor used a hockey grip. Steve Smith was from tennis. Dean Jones would call phantom runs. And Victor Trumper turned the nets into a war zone to survive. The best batters in the world do whatever they have to make runs. We have told their stories in our new book, The Art of Batting.
Sam says, what are your thoughts on Gus Atkinson as a test bowler? I get the impression you're quite low on him despite his early success. Yeah, I just don't. I mean, I've said this question gets asked me about once every 3 weeks. Like, people are really fascinated with my opinion on Gus Atkinson. He doesn't move the ball laterally very much. He's not particularly fast. He has to be incredibly accurate or incredibly fit to be a good bowler. And when he's not, he looks very poor. To me, he's like Anrik Nortje, but like a yard and a half slower. Right? Anrik Nortje, when he's fully fit, is close to the best bowler in the world in every format. He's very rarely fit, sadly. Gus Atkinson is younger and has a slightly different body type and everything, but a lot of things have to go right for Gus Atkinson to be a good bowler. And so what I'm looking for is something that's repeatable. Is it repeatable when you're 95% fit? Is it repeatable when you're bowling a little bit slower? Is it repeatable on all pitches? And with Gus Atkinson, sometimes I do go, he's just running up and bowling pretty straight on most wickets in Test cricket at the moment. His batting is more interesting. I don't think he's an all-rounder, but it's something, right? It's Shane Warne levels of batting, Anil Kumble levels of batting with hitting. I'll take that. I don't think he's in England's best 4 bowlers, though. I haven't seen anything that shows me he is at the moment. Now, a lot of people who I respect in cricket think he will become that. And I've had these conversations with them. I think me and Bumble might have done it on a Bumble and Kimber, right? Like, we've had those sorts of discussions before. So I think with all that said and done, maybe he is slightly better than I think he is. But I just think a lot of things need to be right for him to be a good bowler. And I've also seen him be very, very ordinary. So I just need to see more, I think, is maybe the best way. He's either not yet fully developed, in which case he will become that bowler and I'll be wrong. Or like, this is what he is. And people have to stop thinking that he's this incredible gift, because he's going to be really, really good when everything clicks and pretty ordinary when it doesn't. Josh says, I enjoyed your podcast with Robbie talking about what different international teams will be like in 5 years. But I wonder, did you sell New Zealand short? There seems to be a lot of players coming through the pipeline, even if some are most suited to one format. Okay, so you've got Ravindra, Phillips, Finn Allen, Tim Robertson, Reece Maru, Mitchell Hay, Mohamed Abbas, Will O'Rourke, Zach Fawkes, Ben Sears, Nathan Smith. Okay, so of that list, Ratchin Ravindra, I have no questions on in 5 years' time, right? Finn Allen, I have massive questions on, right? And I have massive questions on him. Glenn Phillips is 28. It's now or never with Glenn Phillips. I've always been a believer. but I now need to see it happen. Tim Robinson, haven't seen enough of yet to give a good idea. Reece Maru, I've seen a little bit of highlights. I'm a big fan. Mitchell Hay, don't know that much about. Mohamed Abbas, don't know that much about. Will O'Rourke, I really like. I wonder how much he can bowl without getting injured. Zach Fawkes, I've seen a little bit of. I think he's fine, but nothing sensational. Ben Sears, I really like, but he's a 27-year-old bowler. Nathan Smith, I really like. I'm not sure he's a generational talent. So just looking at that at the moment, I think there are 3 players who I think are potentially generational players for New Zealand, right? Which is Ravindra, Will O'Rourke, I'm missing one, and Maru, right? Based on the little bits I've seen. Everyone else, I think, has a chance of being good, but has a chance of not being good, Josh. Like, if you're, not being funny, if you're basing your beliefs on Finn Allen, right? Or Nathan Smith, like, lots of teams have Finn Allens and Nathan Smiths coming through. So, yeah, I might have sold them a little bit short. I think they're fine. I don't see a Bolt. Like, if you go back, I was actually maybe a little bit slow on Bolt, but I was very early on Jameson, incredibly early on Southey, and very early on Wagner, right? And Henry. Henry was one where I was like, he's really good. Why does he not get wickets? So all of those guys, I was like, if they assemble this is a real team, right? BJ Watling was another one, right? I'm not seeing that at the moment coming through. Doesn't mean that some of these players won't become that, because, you know, Finn Allen still has a really high ceiling, but he has an incredibly low floor. Glenn Phillips might be the same, right? So I think there's some questions, but they're going to have some success, but I can't remember where we had them in the list, to be honest, either. Reese says, is Steve Smith the best player that you got wrong in your initial assessment of them? Well, Steve Smith's one of the best players of all time. There aren't that many other players at the top of the list, Reese, that I could get that wrong, right? I mean, I've probably got players. Simon Kadich was one. I just didn't believe he was going to come back and make test runs, especially when he changed his technique. I think that technique, that sort of switching across the stumps, was a real blind spot for me, because I just didn't think it would work. And obviously in Kadich's case it did, and Steve Smith's case it did. So I think I'm a little bit wrong with the way that I see that. So yeah, Kadich I got massively wrong. I just didn't think he'd make runs back. And then in the end I was like, they shouldn't be dropping him. They should be dropping Hussey or Ponty. That's how far I turned on Kadich. I'm trying to think. I'm pretty big on Ishant Sharma and Tim Southey. I'm trying to think of plays I was against. I can't think of anyone else. I mean, there's been players that I thought Kick Roach would end up being one of the greats. He's a fantastic bowler, but he's not one of the greats. Part of that is probably the accident. So I'm wrong on him, but in a slightly different direction. I thought Angelo Matthews was potentially going to be one of the greats, and it just hasn't quite happened, has it? Certainly a Sri Lankan great. So there's a couple that I was wrong on. I'm trying to think of ones I've been wrong in the other direction, the Steve Smith direction, though. I just didn't think they could play. I can't think of anyone that's gone on to be really, really good. I suppose if you go back to Jimmy Anderson, but then he gets to wobble ball, and how am I supposed to first see that? And I still thought Jimmy Anderson was pretty good. I just thought his numbers weren't particularly good. Yeah, no, it's a really good question. Simon Kadich is one that instantly comes to mind for me. I can't think of anyone else that I was very doubtful of as a player. Like, if you look at guys like Tim Bresnan, Shardul Thakur, there's a lot of guys I was just like, they're just not that good, guys. I was like, what are you talking about? Look at that. And I'm like, they're just not that good. So, and they turned out not to be good. I suppose, I don't know. But Smith was the one. And that was, as I said, I think that's a particular blind spot with that technique. I'm trying to think of other players I might have felt the same. But yeah. Ali says, given the pitches are constant, do you believe that unlimited or otherwise substitutions would make T20 more of a batting fest or bowling? I think it would make a lot more runs. Absolutely, Ali. A lot more runs if we did that. Rob says, what do you think the ideal ground dimensions are? circle, long, straight, square. I've never thought about this question for a moment in my life. I mean, the MCG is a really, really odd shape, and that's the ground that I grew up at, right? Which is, it's not a square, it's not a circle, and it's not long straight. It's long square, and what, the oval would be another one off the top of my head that is like that. But then I don't like think any less of Adelaide Oval for being the opposite of that. The answer to this is probably that one of the reasons that cricket is as great a sport as it is because there is no one dimension. Right? Like, you have to be good at the MCG and at Trent Bridge and at Eden Park and at the Oval, right? At the Adelaide Oval and at the Kensington Oval. Like, they're all different shapes. And I think that's another level of the incredible nature of cricket. Cam says, can all the Ashes pre-series banter bullshit just calm down? I'm really not looking forward to actual cricket now. So if you go back to my early career, what's the first Ashes I covered? 2009 as a professional. So much is me like moaning about what you are, Cam. And these days I just don't listen. It's funny, I get asked on these shows and, podcasts and all these things. And what do you think about this? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't really hear about it. The Matt Hayden one I had to look up because I knew that I was going to be asked about it a lot. So I looked it up. It's not how I enjoy cricket. Like, I like people talking about cricket. But yeah, I kind of just ignore it now and wait for the cricket to start. Karen says, who sets the betting odds and how often do you agree with them before or during a match? Are experts like former players or analysts involved in setting them? No, certainly not. Also, what odds would you give for the upcoming Ashes? Betting odds are made by betting traders. So they come in with all the sort of information they want. A lot of them just steal from other places. There's a couple of companies that do some of this for them so that they can at least get the numbers fairly accurate. These days, I think, especially in cricket, a lot of people just look at Betfair and just take Betfair's market odds in some cases. But the rest of it is made by individual traders. And quite often it's like one trader doing a game. Rob Barron's probably more of an expert on all this than I am. Certainly former players. Former players would be terrible at sending odds. Absolutely. I mean, they'd occasionally get it spot on, but they just wouldn't do the work. It's a lot of work to get the odds right. And you have to get them right every single time. Right? Like, not every single time, but you have to get them right a large percentage of times. What would I give for the Ashes? I think England are about probably threes and Australia are about 150. I think that's the overall odds. I haven't looked at the actual market. I don't even know if that makes... Oh, no, because there's a draw as well in there, isn't there? Yeah, so maybe that is right. I'm not sure. But that seems about right. Australia should be favourite, but also it won't take much for England to swing back into evens or favourite, which again feels right, I think. Ajit says, I think most people would put Hadley as the greatest New Zealand cricketer, but who would you put as the second greatest? Crowe, Fleming. Geez, that's a promotion for Fleming. McCullum, Williamson. Second greatest New Zealand cricketer. Does Chris Cairns have an argument for this, by the way? Like, as an all-rounder who could bat number 6. He was a pretty good bowler. A lot of people sleeping on Chris Cairns. I know his late career stuff hasn't been... How are the Diamonds going? Sorry, that's a real inside joke for people who don't know. He claimed to be a diamond trader for a while. The second best New Zealand cricketer... It's probably Williamson, but I would certainly have Cairns above Fleming. And I'd have Cairns above McCullum. It's probably Hadley. It's probably Hadley, Williamson, Crowe, Bolt, Cairns, Vittori. Geez, you really promoted Fleming in this. I'm probably missing some. You got guys like Glenn Turner, but they didn't play all that much, obviously. Bert Sutcliffe. Yeah, maybe I should get Jeremy Cody on one day and just force him to do this list. God, he will hate me for that. Alex says, Ohani has revolutionized baseball as the first genuine all-rounder. Who was the first recognized all-rounder in cricket? I'm thinking in the days of gentlemen and players where the gentlemen were batters and the players, bowlers must have been rare. No, it was basically, Alex, from the start. Cricket was always an all-round sport. So I'm probably not the best historian on 1850s and before. But yeah, it was really common to have all-rounders in cricket. That's why it's always confused me about baseball. That's why I did a podcast like 3 years ago on Otani, right? Was it Ben Miller I got on? Because I was like, I don't understand why baseball doesn't have all-rounders. It doesn't make any sense to me. But some of it does, because I understand American sport and specialization and everything. But it never quite made sense. But yes, so with all that said and done, I don't know who the first recognized all-rounder was. But, I'm pretty sure from the beginning of cricket, there were all-rounders. I don't think there was ever a time when there was not all-rounders, as far as I'm aware anyway. Just got a couple of super chats to finish up as well. He says, and then he clicks off them. Where are we here? There we go. AMB5 says, the test trade that came across, and it was India trading Ishant for someone else like Chris Rogers, Phil Hughes, or Steve Smith during the 2010 period. You couldn't trade Ishant, could you? They didn't have another seam bowler. No, if you've got to make a trade in that period, and I think we might have done it on the show, AMB, I think it has to be a spinner, doesn't it? You sort of, who did we say? That sort of Murali Kartik bowler. I think you can trade him, but you couldn't trade Ishant. Ishant was like their number one seamer for a long period of time. So no, I wouldn't have done that. I think, though, that Australia probably, when they had, Jarks, Rogers, I'm trying to think of some others. I think there's like one or two other guys out there that I'm kind of forgetting as well. Maybe the kind of dual and level players probably could have got some extra spinners from, say, somewhere like Bangladesh or India through if they wanted opening batters. But I don't think India would need Australian batters, but maybe to Sri Lanka or somewhere else, they could have done something like that. Because they did have a couple of guys that were pretty good who just didn't get a go. Like, as Voges would be another one. Even Marcus North probably deserved more of a go before he did. I'm trying to think of other players in that period. Australia never used Mark Cosgrove. Mark Cosgrove is the perfect trade chip. He definitely should have been traded to another country. That sounds wrong, doesn't it? Mark Cosgrove, sent out of Australia. Anyway, the scene uploader is telling me I now need to find one from in here. Here we go. You agreed some wobble ball in our. You agreed some wobble ball in out at will by rolling fingers, tilted wrist for swing. Thinking those who swing both ways could make the most potential wobble ball bowlers as they can wobble it both ways. Like Anderson. Yeah. So from what we know, that's kind of. I think it's gone beyond that now. But traditionally, if you swung the ball in, you wobbled the ball away. And if you swung the ball away, you wobbled the ball in, right? And then Anderson was the one who sort of worked out that you could do it a bit more in both directions. But also, a lot of it's to do with the angle, right? And the angle at which you're bowling. And I think actually there probably was always a bit of wobble in both directions. But there is definitely, Tim Murtaugh from Ireland was the one who sort of took me through this of like, if you get your action slightly wrong, and I think if you go back and look, I think Sean Pollock did this as well. If you get your outswing action kind of wrong, you almost automatically make it into like an off cutter, right? Quite often it just goes dead straight, but just on occasion it pings back in. And I think that's slightly different to just what the wobble ball was, but it's also, it would be fair to say that Sean Pollock also bowled the wobble ball, right? So there's a kind of hybrid. This is where it gets really murky when you're trying to explain it. This is why, I was talking to Harmy, and Harmy's like, it's always existed. And he's right, of course. It's not like every bowler ever was dead straight, but that's different than a repeatable skill that everyone could be taught how to do. And so when you get to the Anderson level, that's different than the Tim Murtaugh or the Sean Pollock level, unless Sean Pollock disagrees with me, and I want to chat to him about this. But once you get to the Anderson level, what you're really getting to then is someone who understands what he's doing and is trying to do that. But even amongst that, as good as Anderson was, I think he would say the exact same thing, which is sometimes it just didn't do anything. That's the genius and also the frustration of the wobble ball. Anyway, that's it for Wagon Wheel this week. We just put a video up on the main channel about India winning the World Cup, and we've got out, I'm hoping anyway, the most improved player video has been finished. We're hoping to put it up later this week. It's a real labor of love. Me and Sean put a lot of effort into it. Sean did an incredible job, and Ruckshit is now, bearing away on it as well. But there's a lot of work that went into making that happen. So thanks to everyone. So please go out. It's something that we love doing on this channel. We've actually got quite a few big ideas, but we've also got 3 test series coming up. So over the next couple of months, there's a lot of content on the main channel and obviously on the podcast channel. Me and Varun will be coming out with random things while everyone else is doing crick picks. We'll see you again very soon here on Good Areas Live.
This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now.